My name is Robert Brawley, and Susan, I'm going to ask if y'all let me come down here and run with you guys.
Yeah.
Sounds like you got a good crew. And I first ran in I went to register in 1962, and my family and everybody in the county was, well, 63% of the people were registered Democrat. And my cousin was registrar. She said, "You can register Democrat, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am." She came back and handed me a sheet of paper and said, "Here's the people you vote for." I said, "Beg your pardon?" She said, "If you register as a Democrat, these are the people you vote for." I said, "If I register as Republican, you're going to tell me who to vote for?" She said, "Absolutely not." I said, "Put me down to Republican, because ain't nobody tell me how to vote anything." And in 1978, my wife and I were sitting around complaining about how Mr. Carter was doing things, President Carter was doing things, and decided if we were going to complain, we should run for office. And that's how I got involved in the office. The first time I ran, I lost big time. In 1978, 1980, I came back, and with the district 63% Democrat, I won by 56 votes out of 34,000. 2 years later, I won with 56%. 2 years later, 66%. 2 years later, 76%. And the Democrats haven't put up a candidate since 1988 in our district. So I think we did it by working together. You've seen what happens when you work together. We got our county working together. We got our people working together. And one of the ways we did it was getting people to sit down and talk to each other about issues. When I say issues, I heard you talking about reading the books. If you're going to debate issues, if you're going to talk to issues and you want to influence people, talk about being Christian. Paul was a great preacher, wasn't he? What was one of the strengths Paul had in his preaching? He knew the people he was talking to. He could adapt his sermon to the people he's in. If you know any good preachers now, same thing. If you know any good politicians, the same thing. Get to know the people you're talking to. One of the ways you're going to get to know the people you're talking to, yes, read these books so you know where you're founded. But you also need to read the books that don't necessarily agree with your opinion. Because if you read the books that don't agree with you, then you're going to understand what the other person's thinking, and you can talk to them on their level so that the exchange is meaningful to both sides. And then you'll start winning arguments also, and you'll start pulling people over to your side. It works, believe me. I'm not going to get into a summary of the General Assembly. For one thing, we're not through yet. We'll be going back next week, hopefully to adjourn. That's being argued as we speak tonight. But by the time you have your next meeting, Susan will have a summary for a completed session of the General Assembly and can do that. What I would like to talk about is some things that we as Republicans have got to work on, and we're going to have to come together and be united. And unfortunately, most of them, I seem to be on the wrong side with the Republicans right now. But it happened to be things I fought for 18 years in the General Assembly. One is toll roads. Up in Iredell County, we're looking at a toll road going from Iredell County into Charlotte. They'll claim there's be hot lanes. You can have a choice of driving on them or driving in the general purpose lane. Well, let me ask you, if the general purpose lanes are congested and there's nobody in those toll lanes, which one do you have a choice? If it's going to cost you $10 each way on that hotline. $10 each way is $20 a day, $100 a week, $400 a month. You really don't have a choice. And unfortunately, they can change the rates so they can lower the rate if they want to, but we're signing a $650 million contract for 50 years, and if the tolls don't pay for it, we appreciate it, you're going to be paying for it because the state guarantees the contract. And that's to put in toll roads that in 2009 there was a consultant hired to tell what could be done to relieve the congestion. That consultant said for $64 million you can put an extra lane on each side, which increases the traffic by 50%, capacity of traffic by 50%, and that will meet the projected population growth for the next 25 years. Do we want toll roads in North Carolina? I don't. When I talked to the Department of Transportation, they said, well, don't worry about it. You're just the beginning. They listed 5 projects. Ultimately, the end result, and by the way, tolling I-95 from Virginia to South Carolina was one of their projects for tolling. So they're planning on doing it, unless we can get it stopped and recognized. I do have to tell you, if you stop the toll roads and they resurface, they do the highways construction needs to be done, there will be a tax increase. If you want something, you're going to have to pay for it. And if we do meet the roads and the growth that's taking place, especially with cars getting better gas mileage, something is going to have to change to put money in there to pay for the roads. So even I admit it's either going to be toll roads or accept some way of paying for the fact that we're going to have to do construction. Toll roads are one issue. Another issue are public schools. We did a lot, and next meeting you'll hear more about what we've done for the public schools, because we did a lot to help the public schools, I think. Part of our challenge, though, was we also did a lot to help private schools and homeschooling by taking money away from the public schools and charter schools to give to them. They don't meet the same requirements as public schools. We as the government are trying to provide public education through public schools. I happen to be in the General Assembly. I served from 1980 to 1998 in the General Assembly. I was there when we set up charter schools, set up allowed private schooling, homeschooling, and the arguments were, and we supported it, because if you want to have a choice in where you send your children to school, great. We want you to have a choice. But the government has responsibility to provide schools. We call it the public school system. And we're going to use tax dollars for that. If you want to pull them out of that, that's your responsibility. And that has worked for a long time. But if we keep pulling money out of the public schools, somebody's going to have to find money to make up for that also. Another issue that's sweeping across this state is called public-private partnerships. Does everyone know what a public-private partnership is?
Yes, corporate fascism,
Okay.
crony capitalism, call it what you want.
That's
Explain it for the crowd.
a public-private partnership is contracting out government services in some way or another to a private entity. The toll roads up there, they're talking about contracting to a Spanish company and guaranteeing them an income for 50 years. But that's a public-private partnership.
The Chinese own the toll roads down in South Florida.
Ultimately, if you're not careful, well, I don't know how they're going to own a government entity.
No, it's they're the business that holds the lease on the toll roads.
But you'll be indebted to them. You'll be indebted to them until they get all the profit they're supposed to out of it.
Yep.
Yes. Public-private partnerships are viewed by some as the best way to fund a project. They're also the most expensive way to fund a project because you've got to pay the administrative and profit and everything that goes along with being in a private business. I went to Turkey last year. Turkey is well known for their public-private partnerships. There were 4 legislators along and our spouses, and we went to this ski resort, 6-mile slope. If any of you go snow skiing, great, beautiful place. We were riding the tram up, and the manager of the ski slope was on the tram with us. Another legislator said, you know, we've got to follow Turkey's example. Y'all have really done an outstanding job with public-private partnerships. We've got to follow your example in the United States. That ski slope, by the way, the town mayor had $6 million of town money. I don't know if y'all do this with the county or not, but $6 million of town taxes went to help him build the ski slope, which he owned. That was the public-private part of it. And the manager asked the legislator, said, what are you saying? And the guy again said, we need to follow the example set by Turkey. And the manager said, well, you better follow it fast. This will be the last public-private partnership in Turkey. They're so corrupt. I had to say, tell it like it is, brother. And that is the impression that even other countries are seeing in public-private partnerships. That government, one of the things you hear often, and I'm a businessman, I have built and sold several businesses. By the way, I raised 5 kids and 12 grandchildren, which I'm very proud of. That's the reason I had to sell a lot. I forgot what I was talking about. Go back to my notes here, I'm sorry.
The last public-private contract.
We've got to get out of the public-private business. Public-private partnerships will just siphon off money. I believe you described it. It'll siphon off taxpayer money into the private sector. Something else you don't hear a lot of talk about. I had a couple discussions here before everybody came. If this country does not go back to one nation under God and honor the traditional values that made us what we are, it really doesn't matter who you vote for. If you're not going to hold up Christian standards and Christian principles, you're really not supporting what America was based on to start with. There is no other. I was fascinated by other religions when I was coming through college, like I guess most young folks are. And by the way, we're glad to see you young folks here. Most of the time I get to see people my age, so I'm glad to see you guys here. But we've got to go back to Christianity. And anybody who tells me that they separate the separation of church and state, and even when the reference is there, it's to put the Pope in as president. It's not to take your values, lay them down over here and go over here and do your politics. If you can do that, you can have your religion to start with.
That's right.
Because you don't have any core values. What are your values when you get over here to politics? If you're going to throw your religion out the door or shut it out, what are the values you're making your decisions on? You've got a great representative. Anybody who's watched Representative Martin work knows what her values are. They know she believes in America. They know she stands up and fights for what she thinks is right. And they also know that she does consider the rule that says do unto others as you have them do unto you. So you've got a great representative. You've got a great opportunity to be heard in Raleigh. And with that, I will be quiet and answer any questions. I said I would answer questions. Yes, ma'am.
It's a question about the toll roads. My understanding is that, is it Centra out of Spain that will get the money for the first 50 years off those toll roads? Is that basically the way it is?
Centra is the company, and they are a Spanish-owned company. Yes, ma'am. And they are having financial troubles, and they cannot get something you don't read about in the paper, you haven't heard about. One of the reasons nothing's been done yet, They can't issue bonds to do the financing.
Aren't they the same company that did the toll roads in Texas that's folded? Or
They're
whatever
banned,
they
they're banned from Texas now, yes. Yes, sir.
Can you clarify what you're saying? I can hear about half of what you're talking about, but about the schools and all this, are you saying that you're more for the public schools and you're really not happy with the private entities of any schooling whatsoever?
I am 100% in support of the private schooling, but when it comes to tax dollars, I think we need to use our tax dollars for the public commitment that we're making in providing a public education. What we should be doing is bringing those standards in those public schools up to what has been achieved in some charter schools.
Yeah, because I'd have to agree with that, because I look at, public schools, all over the country. I went to school, my graduating class was 800 students, and that's who graduated, not who didn't graduate. We're 3 square city blocks. I got a pretty decent education, but I also was in private school before that, and I got a lot better education. And having teenagers myself, and one that went to Pike High, he got a great education, but there was 2 teachers that I questioned about their attention to students. And so I have a lot of problems with teachers who are screaming, they want more money, they got tenure, but they're not doing their job. If I go to my job and I don't do my job, I'm fired. And so there's a problem when I'm looking at all of my taxes that go into the public schools, and teachers that deserve a raise aren't getting it. And those who don't deserve a raise are getting it. And when I'm looking at Joe Blow sitting next to me and he's not working as hard as I am, but he's making twice the money that I am, I'm not a happy camper. And the same thing should go with school districts. Now, I don't mind public schools, but what I do mind is, teachers that are getting paid and they're not doing their work. Again, I go to work and I sit on my rump and do nothing, I'm fired.
Yeah, and I'm sorry. I'll let Representative Martin answer any questions about the school system here. I don't know anything about the school system here. I can tell you in Iredell County, I've got 2 school systems. One of them, the superintendent's recognized nationally as Superintendent of the Year, nationwide. In the other one, statewide, he's the Superintendent of the Year. You can go into our school system. I've done this. I've been in a lot of schools. I enjoy going to the schools. Well, with 12 grandchildren, I keep up with what the kids are doing. I've been in a classroom, and it happened to be a 4th grade. The bell rings for the silent period. Y'all have silent period here? You have silent period in school at 2 to 3 minutes, silent. Well, they used to have prayer in all of our schools at home, and now they can't. They can't have prayer, so they have the silent period. At 9 o'clock, the bell rang for silent period. I was going to start speaking after the silent period. That bell rang. The teacher stood up and said, "Anybody who doesn't want to participate in prayer may go out in the hallway. The rest of you bow your heads." She got through. I couldn't wait till everything was over. I went on, I said, "How do you do that?" I said, "I thought you can't do that. That's against the law." She said, "It's my classroom." And it really, we can talk about laws. We run for public office so we get down there and pass laws that are going to make everything better. Nothing is going to get better until every human being in this nation starts improving what's in here.
Do you believe in the core curriculum?
Core curriculum?
Common Core.
I know what it is.
Not the SLIM, sorry. The Common Core. I mean, I dealt with that a little bit when I take some courses at community college. I'm sorry, 2 + 2 is 2. And I'm being told by a college teacher that she don't care about the answer. She wants to know how I'm going to get to it. And that don't matter. That makes no sense to me. The answer is what matters. If I got a short way of getting there, I'm going to get there.
The major problem I have with Common Core, I do not agree with the federal government telling us how to run our school system.
That's right. Amen.
Period.
That's right.
But we've got to have standards, and this bill we passed where we're going to set up a North Carolina committee and have, I think it's good to have some standards, but you can't Common Core's been around, what, just a couple of years, and while you're hearing about all the bad things across North Carolina, the 2 school districts in the district I represent are recognized nationally and statewide as being the best in this area. And I can tell you, those teachers and principals jump my case. They say Common Core is the best thing that came along. But, well, let me finish. If you talk to them and listen and sit in on their training, what they're really saying is, it's nice to have a standard. Because I asked them, I said, okay, it's going to come up for a vote. If we vote to get rid of Common Core, what are you going to change?
Well, then there should just be a...
You know what the answer was?
I didn't have Common Core.
Do you know what their answer was?
And I do very well with everything that I have to do.
Do you know what their answer was when I asked them what they would change if we eliminate Common Core? Nothing. We won't change anything. And it's all up to that teacher in the classroom and what she's willing or he's willing to do in teaching those students and setting standards for the kids to live up to.
Well, there should be standards, but I don't understand why they have to introduce a math that when my kid comes home, I have to go to school to learn to study it. And when I'm looking at a math that says 10 plus 5 minus 1 plus 2 minus 6, that and the other thing, and my son says, do this. So I do it. Now, we were all taught, you do math left to right. It's American. You add, you subtract, and you multiply, you divide, and you get your answer, and that's what your answer is going to be. You know, when I was in school, and when he was in school, we get this little curriculum thing that says that you're supposed to use an acronym called My Poor Aunt Sally. Well, my poor Aunt Sally dropped dead about halfway through the class because I got to parenthesize everything, and I got to do this, and I got to do that. Now, here's the real problem. The instructor in my college, when she was instructing me in this, the class as a whole came up with 3 different ways to come to that conclusion of that answer. Right. And she could not verify which one was right. So why are they teaching it if the teachers themselves don't understand it? There it goes. They gain tax money for teachers that can't teach.
My degree is in engineering, and it took me a while to figure out exactly what they were doing with math. Yes, they've got to teach it so the student can understand it. And again, I'll go back to Iredell County. The teachers are doing that while actually meeting the standard. They don't get into they did not get into what you're talking about. I was amazed. I don't know why they do it and do it so well without and claiming that they're getting credit for meeting all these standards, but they don't do all the things that are being talked about outside of Iredell County.
See, I just don't understand why we have to have it.
We don't have it anymore. We voted it out.
Next question.
I just have a quick statement. I see Greg's here, so I want to hurry up and get this done. You were talking about the tax money on the roads. If we don't do toll roads, you know, talking about having to raise my taxes. I think it'd be a lot better off if you trim a little fat. We all know that if North Carolina federal government, North Carolina state government, even the county of Wilson was run like a business, you'd be broke years and years and years ago.
I don't want to dump everything off on Representative.
Oh, no, and I'm not saying you two are playing. I'm saying
this budget is working in that direction. Part of the problem that they're even talking about tolls is $280 million a year has been coming out of the Highway Trust Fund. Over, I think it's around $4 billion at this point has come out of the Highway Trust Fund, spent on other things. What would $4 billion do in the highway fund? And what the budget was doing was working, trying to cut that fat, so they quit taking that money out of the trust fund.
Yeah, and I was saying for you guys like Chris and Glenn, stuff that gets done for the state that the state pays for out of tax money.
Right.
With the person doing that work getting paid the same thing if they were doing it for a private individual? I think not most times.
That, it will take a good manager to do that.
And I'm done.
Yes, ma'am.
I want to go back to the school. You say the money should go to the public school. Yes, the people pay taxes, but the people who teach their own kids or send the kids to a charter school, they should get something because they pay the taxes for the public school.
Well, that's That is the direction everything is going. But when you do that, the state has a responsibility to set up a training system. And the state can't set up private homeschooling. So how does the state meet its responsibility and take money away from it at the same time?
Well, then the people shouldn't be taxed. I mean, a family who sends their kids to public school, say, pay taxes. The same income people who send their kids to charter school, they also pay the same taxes, but they don't get nothing for it.
That's their choice.
Yeah, no, in a way, you should either let the people not have to pay all these taxes. The public school even gains when the people go to the charter school.
Right now, the money does go to the charter school with the student, and it goes away from the public school with the student to a charter school, which is another public school.
Well,
But it's not a private school or the home school.
Well, but the private
There's
school
more movement in that direction of school choice.
Ma'am, I don't mean to cut off, but that is a very complex issue, and it's debated in the General Assembly every day. Because we're trying to work out an answer. How do you be fair to both sides?
And we've moved in the direction of allowing money to follow the child to private schools with opportunity scholarships and things like that, which are being challenged in the courts. But we are moving forward this year for the first time to have that. Right now, it's just for students who qualify for low and reduced or free and reduced lunch, who have financial difficulty, and if you can afford it, make a choice. But for people who are really in need, to be able to make that choice. So we're moving more in that direction.
Well,
but it's a challenge because we do have.
I mean, you maybe don't have to pay as much as to the public school, because the private school are handling their money so much better than the public schools.
County funding goes to charter schools too. County funds that we pay.
That's good.
And one of the biggest arguments on the other side that we deal with is, why should our tax dollars, public money, go if you don't have the same standards in place and you're not controlling the quality?
If you have better standards and a higher education,
exactly.
we wouldn't want to support
and
that.
We have to argue that it's the parents who are making those choices, and we can talk more about that next time when I have time.
Yeah, I'm going to ask that we stop this. While we're talking about standards, again, so the audience understands what you're saying. I think we had two different standards being talked about. You're talking about standards of education. She's talking about the standards of providing for the handicapped, providing for the disadvantaged, providing for the disturbed, providing for the sick, providing everything that has to be done, and this public schools have to take whoever comes to school, where the charter schools do not have to do that. That's the standard she's talking about, I think.
Well, I have another question, not about the school.
Okay.
I didn't quite get who you are, but you pointed out you're Republican, and I want to say, why do the Republicans hate the Tea Party so much?
I love you. I could not answer that question. I do think that some of that debate comes from both sides. I've never had any trouble getting along with anybody, with one exception. And my campaign slogan has always been, together we can. When I was running in a campaign, and the lady on one side of the table and the lady on the other side, this one was pro-life and that one was pro-choice, and they both they both were campaigning for me because we found common ground to work on, and they worked with each other. I think if the Tea Party and the Republican Party would sit down and talk to each other, they'd find out they got so much in common they can work together.
Agree with us. Agree with us.
But they got to sit down and talk to each other first.
If they agree with us.
I think there'd be a lot of agreement, yes.
Pro-life
And I got a signal that says I'm through unless somebody just has a heart-burning question. And Doctor? Turn it over to him.
Mm-hmm.